Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing really well today. So for today's video, I thought I would do something a little bit different and talk about embroidery. I've been getting really into embroidery recently. It is the perfect quiet, stay-at-home, chill type of activity, so I've really been enjoying it over the past couple of months. So I thought today I would give you a little introduction to embroidery, show you how to do 4 different stitches, and then also show you how you can put those different stitches together into a pattern. I have used the pattern to make this little t-shirt here, and this pattern is a free download that I've put up on my website, so it's the entire alphabet going from A to Z. So you can just download this template and print it out from my website for free. And I've also included a little and sign as well, which I think is just so cute. So it's all the alphabet with these floral elements, which I think is a really great beginner project if you want to get into embroidery. So let me tell you a little bit about some basics of embroidery and then about the 4 stitches that you'll need to complete this project. So basically with embroidery, you can think about drawing a picture with thread. What my mom always told me when she was teaching me how to embroider when I was a kid was don't pull your thread too tight because the thread is what makes the picture. So you are going to need a few different materials to embroider. The first one is an embroidery needle. Now embroidery needles just have a bigger eye than a regular needle would, so that makes it a little easier to thread through the thicker thread that we use for embroidery. Now the thread that we use for embroidery is called embroidery floss, and it is so much fun to buy all of the different colors. You can find this at a lot of different stores. I've even seen it at Walmart, but also craft stores. And it's really inexpensive as well, which is great. So embroidery floss is a little bit different from regular thread because it's made up of a lot of different strands that can be pulled apart. So for what we're doing today, we'll be using 3 strands of embroidery floss. So you can just pull the strands apart to have the number that you need. I also really like to embroider with all of the strands. This piece that I did behind me, which the pattern is from a YouTuber named Diana, and I will link to her channel down below if you would like to see her embroidery. It's amazing. She's really, really talented. But hers use all of the strands of thread. So that's what it would look like if I were doing that. But for this one, we're just doing 3 strands. Something else that you'll need to embroider is an embroidery hoop. I actually get a lot of my embroidery supplies secondhand. You can find little packs of embroidery supplies at thrift stores, and I've also been given a lot of random things from different older ladies in my life over the years. So this is a really old embroidery hoop actually, and it's kind of bent a little bit out of shape here at the top. But all these do is hold your fabric really tightly and securely so that it doesn't move around while you're doing your stitching. So they have this little screw here at the top that will tighten or loosen, so you'll loosen it up before you put your fabric into the hoop, and it separates into these 2 pieces. And then once you've sandwiched your fabric between the 2, you can just tighten up the screw and pull your fabric really nice and tight. So to embroider, you'll also want some fabric, and I would really recommend just practicing on some plain scrap fabric. Things like cotton or linen work really well because they're nice woven materials. I will say that embroidering on a knit fabric like a t-shirt is a little bit more difficult, so you might want something like a stabilizer if you're going to do that. Now I didn't do that just because I kind of wanted to freehand it and just see how it turned out, but it is a little bit more challenging trying to get the stitches to work on a stretchy fabric, so just bear that in mind. So you can definitely just jump straight in and start embroidering on a project, but if you want to, I would really recommend just practicing on a little bit of fabric so that you get the stitches down and can really see what you like. One more thing that's helpful to have is a little pair of scissors. This is definitely not necessary. You could use any scissors that you want, but I do like having a small pair of scissors just so that I can clip my threads really close. So those are the materials that you're going to need to get started. And for this project, I did mean to mention before, for this particular pattern, I used 4 different colors of embroidery floss. A lot of mine is really old, so the colors aren't really current, but you could choose whatever 4 colors you think would work best for your design. So let's talk a little bit about the stitches that you're going to need to make this project. There are 4 different stitches that we're going to learn today. If you already know them, feel free to skip ahead, but they are French knots, bullion knots, stem stitch, and lazy daisy. So these are great basic embroidery stitches that you can do so much with, so they're really good ones to practice. So what I'm going to do now is jump into a little tutorial showing you how to do each of these stitches, and then I'll show you how I put them together to make this t-shirt. So before I start any of my stitches, here is how I have my needle threaded. I have it threaded with 3 strands of embroidery floss and then a knot in one end, but no knot at the needle. So for the French knot, I'm going to bring my needle up through the fabric and then wrap the thread around the needle 2 times. After I do this, I will just put the needle back into the fabric near where I brought it up originally. You can see it's really close, but not quite in the same place. And then I will just carefully pull the thread all the way through, leaving a little knot on the surface of the fabric. So let me just show you this one more time. I'm bringing the needle up through the fabric and then wrapping it twice with my thread and then putting the needle back down near where I brought it up before and pulling all the way through to leave my French knot. So you can go back and watch this as many times as you need to get the idea of how the French knot is made, but with a little practice, it's really simple. The next stitch is the bullion knot. So first up, bring your needle up through the fabric and then find the length that you want your final knot to be. I want mine to be about 1/4 of an inch here. So I'm putting my needle back through the fabric here and then bringing it back up right about where my thread first came out through the surface of the fabric. So you can see I'm not pulling the needle all the way through at this point. So now I'm going to start wrapping my thread around the needle similarly to how we did for the French knot, but this time I'm going to wrap between 8 and 15 times. You can do this as many or as few times as you want, but the more times you wrap around the thread, the fluffier your final knot will be. So this one I wrapped 8 times, and the next one I'll show you a few more so you can kind of compare the appearance of it. So after you pull your thread through to kind of tighten the stitches a little bit, you can just put the needle back through at the end of the stitch to finish off the bullion knot. So let me show you one more time. I'm bringing my thread up through the fabric and then finding the length I want my stitch to be, and then bringing it back through the other side without pulling my needle all the way through. And then this one I'm going to wrap about 15 times just so you guys can compare the number of wraps of the thread. I like how this one looks a little bit more. I think it just has a more nice appearance. It just sits out on the surface of the fabric a little bit better. So pulling that needle through, and then I will just stitch down at the end of my knot. This next stitch is called Lazy Daisy, and it's perfect for flower petals or leaves. So start by bringing your needle up through the fabric and then put it back down into the fabric really close to where you brought it up. You can see it's really close to the original place I brought my needle up through right here. So pull your needle through right here, but don't pull your thread all the way through. We want to leave this loop right here. Now find the length you want your final Lazy Daisy stitch to be and bring your needle back up through the fabric, pulling the loop over the needle. When you pull your thread back out, you'll see this little flower petal shape is left. So all that's left to do now is put your needle back through the fabric right near where you just brought it up to finish off your Lazy Daisy stitch. I like to fluff mine out with my needle just a little bit to help the shape look a little bit better. Let me show you one more time, bringing the needle up through the fabric and then putting it back down really close to where I brought it up, pulling that through but not pulling the thread all the way through, leaving a loop, bringing the needle back up through the fabric and pulling all the way through so that the loop creates the flower petal, and then just stitching back down. And then the last stitch for today is the stem stitch. This is great for any kind of outline or flower stem. So start by bringing your needle up through the fabric and then putting it back down as if you were taking a really wide stitch here. The first one is a little bit of a setup stitch. Then bring your needle back up halfway between the two ends of the stitch and pull all the way through. Now we'll start the stem stitch as we'll continue to do it the whole time. So take a little bit of a shorter stitch here, and this time bring your needle up through and pull it out where the end of the last stitch was, and you'll just continue in this pattern, stitching down and then bringing it back up at the end of the last stitch. Now the whole time you'll want to keep your kind of working thread to one side so that this twists in a continual fashion as you continue on. It's going to look a little bit like a twisted rope as you keep stitching, which is really great for following any kind of outline. So now that we've learned these 4 basic stitches, let me show you how to use them to follow this template that I made. So you'll want to print off your template, and then there are a couple ways you could trace it onto your fabric. If you have fabric that's not really thick, I would recommend using carbon tracing paper, but since I'm doing this on a t-shirt, I am just putting the template behind the t-shirt and holding it up to a window and tracing over with a pencil, whatever works best for you. I think that white fabric or really sheer fabric is best for embroidery because it's a little easier to transfer the pattern. So I'm just drawing over the entire template here so that all of my lines are transferred to my t-shirt. So now that I've traced the template onto my t-shirt, I can go ahead and hoop my fabric using my embroidery hoop. Now, since I am doing this on a t-shirt and not a woven fabric, I want to be really careful not to pull my fabric so tightly that it stretches out of shape. It could be really easy to do with this really stretchy type of material. So if you're doing this on a knitted fabric like a t-shirt, just be really careful. You want to just not tighten your hoop quite as much. So to start embroidering, I'm going to start with the roses, and I'm using a darker and lighter shade for each rose and the bullion stitch. So the great thing about the bullion stitch is that you can just follow those rose petal lines, and each bullion stitch creates almost like a rose petal. So I will do 2 bullion stitches with the darker color on the inside of each rose, and then all of the outside stitches will be done in the lighter color. So you just want to make sure that you're kind of adjusting the number of times that you wrap your stitches to follow the length of each stitch, because they do vary just a little bit. So you can experiment with that a little bit and make sure that they are to your liking. So once I finish with the darker color, I'll just go all around the outside and do all the rest of the petals in the lighter color. And this just gives a little bit of depth to this embroidery and makes it a little bit more interesting. So here you can see how the roses turned out, and now I'm going to go on to do the daisies. So I'm using a light cream yellow color here to do these, and I'm just going to use my lazy daisy stitch and go around the flower over each petal using a lazy daisy stitch. This is a really simple flower to do, but it adds a lot of interest to a piece of embroidery. Now moving on to the little leaf branch type things, I am starting with the stem and using my stem stitch here to follow that entire length. So it shouldn't take too many stitches, but just starting with the stem, and then we'll add the leaves from there. Now to add the leaves, I'll just be using my lazy daisy stitch, which makes a great little leaf type shape. So I'm just going over each outline of a leaf and using a lazy daisy stitch to finish those off. And then the final element for these flowers is the French knot. So I'm using this really pretty gold colored thread and adding a French knot to the center of each of the daisies. That just gives it a little flower center. And then I also have these clusters of French knots that I'm just going to fill in to make this almost like cluster type of flower. So now the last thing to do is just finish off the piece by outlining the entire letter with my stem stitch. So I'm just using some black thread and the stem stitch and going all the way around the outline of the letter. I did find that stitching stem stitch on a knit fabric like a t-shirt gave it a little bit more of a separated look, so just bear that in mind, but I actually really like the way that it looks in the end. And here is how my embroidery turned out. Alright guys, so that is going to be it for this video today. I hope you found it helpful if you're wanting to just get started with embroidery. It's such a fun hobby to have, and you can really do a lot with these 4 different stitches. Be sure to go grab your free template. I will have it linked down below so that you can do the alphabet or whatever you want to choose from that. I really look forward to seeing how you guys use this, so be sure to tag me on Instagram if you do embroider from this pattern yourself. I had so much fun making it, and I'm really excited to see how you guys end up using it. There are so many different projects I think you could make just with the alphabet, so I'm really excited to see what you guys do. You could put it together into words, you could do your school letters. There's so many different options with that, I think, so I'm really excited to see how you guys apply your creativity to it. But thank you guys so much for watching and spending your time here on my channel today. If you are new, I would love for you to go ahead and subscribe by clicking that red button down below. I post a lot about sewing, thrifting, style, and anything kind of crafty, so if you're into any of that, I would love to have you stick around for future videos. But yeah, thank you guys so much for hanging out today, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!